Hello everyone, welcome to AOS-CX 10.11 update. I am Shobna, Technical Marketing Engineer, Aruba Campus Switching. In this session, we'll see about certificate enrollment using EST via config distribution feature added as part of AOS-CX 10.11 release. So let's start the session. As part of today's session, we'll see the following agenda. Overview of the EST feature, use cases associated with this, details and caveats of this feature, configurations for the EST feature, best practices, troubleshooting if there is any issues, a short demo of how the feature works, and any additional resources required for this feature. EST. EST stands for Enrollment over Secure Transport. It is a protocol that defines how devices can use to request trusted CS certificates and to enroll and re-enroll certificates from these trusted CS certificates via secure channel automatically. EST client is implemented as part of PKI infrastructure in our AOS-CX switches. EST client on AOS-CX uses HTTP over TLS. It relies on the availability of TCP network, DNS service, and EST services reachable from our host AOS-CX switches. Certificate enrollment over EST is available from 10.6 release onwards in our AOS-CX switches. Now this certificate enrollment using EST via config distribution is an enhancement added to the existing EST feature from 10.11 release. We can perform certificate enrollment using CLI and REST via EST. But these certificate parameters and EST profile association does not reside in our switch configuration. If you could see the below screenshot taken prior to 10.11 release, we could not find any certificate parameters or EST profile association CLIs. From 10.11 onwards, certificate parameters and EST profile association will reside in the switch configuration. That is a major enhancement as part of this release. If you could see here, show run and begin with crypto PKI certificate, it will display the certificate parameters and how it can be enrolled via EST profile. Hence, we could do the certificate enrollment using any of the config input methods like TFTP, SFTP, SCP, or using our own applications like NetEdit and Central. In coming slides, we will see the details of this enhancement. Let's see the use case of this feature. Major use case of this feature is after pushing a config to AOS-CX switch, the switch will be able to install a certificate without further human intervention, like using manual enrollment via CLI or REST. Because AOS-CX certificate parameters do not reside within switch configuration, it was not working well in our central config workflow. As a result, all the PKI configuration must be performed via CLI or REST, which is not supported by Central. Now, this major bottleneck for Central integration is overcome by this enhancement. In general, this enhancement will allow full EST configuration to be pushed via Central config push model, which will have the switch initiate an automated EST enrollment for the certificates. There are several Central customers wishing to use their own PKI for infrastructure authentication that need a way to deploy search through config that is also solved with this feature. Besides Central use case, ZTP use case also falls into the same situation. There arises a question, where are these certificates are used in our AOS-CX switches? There are multiple applications using the certificates in our AOS-CX switches. So listing them: syslog, HTTPS, captive portal, RADSEC, .NET supplicant, EST client, hardware switch controller. So all these applications are using certificates in our AOS-CX switches. Let's see the details about this enhancement. So before we start the details about this enhancement, let's see the details about EST client in our AOS-CX switches. So EST client requires a configuration to create an EST profile, which includes an EST server URL and name of the VRF in which the HTTP connection to the EST server can be established. So once this configuration is made, the EST client in the switch will try to contact the EST server, and first it will download the trusted CS certificate. So this trusted CS certificates will be downloaded not only during the initial configuration phase. So every time when we do a certificate enrollment or re-enrollment, we will try to download it again. The reason being is if there are possible changes to a CS certificates, it has to be downloaded again. So the certificate enrollment user interface offers a parameter of the EST profile. So when that parameter is given, the PK infrastructure will call the EST client to perform the certificate enrollment using this EST profile name. So let's see the scale of certificates in our PK infrastructure. So it supports up to 16 EST profiles and 63 trusted CS certificates and 18 certificates. So let's see details about our enhancement certificate enrollment using EST via config distribution. As discussed earlier, so now the certificate enrollment can happen via config distribution. So how the configuration can be applied to our switches? So it can be either in the CLI format or it can also be in the JSON format. So which are the ways in which these configurations can be applied to our switches? As a normal configuration distribution can be possible via TFTP, SFTP servers, SCP server, USB, or internally within our switch checkpoint, or using applications like Central or NetEdit. So how we were previously doing our configuration in producing these applications, the same holds good for this enhancement as well. So far we have seen the overview and details about this feature. Let's jump into the configuration part. First comes the prerequisite for certificate enrollment via EST. So we need to make sure the EST server is up and running with the CHN and service ready to issue a certificate. So there can be multiple ways the EST server communication can happen. It can either act as a CS server as well, or there can be a different CS server and EST server can communicate to that CS server. So we need to have a service certificate for the EST server, and optionally, even in our switches, we can have a client certificate for communication with the EST server. So basically, the communication between EST server and our EST client switch is secured over TLS. So for that, the first step is to configure a root TA certificate as a TA profile in our CX switches. So that will be the TA profile to communicate between the switch and then the EST server. So here comes the configuration, crypto PK, TA profile, and name of the TA profile. And then we can import the root certificate in PEM format. So once the certificate import is successful, we need to make sure the EST server is reachable from our AOS-CX switches. It can be either over IP or the DNS resolution has to happen correctly. And if we have a different CS server, the EST server also should be able to reach the CS server. And if there is a client certificate for the EST client, we need to make sure we install the root certificate on that server that will validate the client certificate. Next comes the EST profile configuration. So all these configurations are legacy configurations that are available from 10.6 release onwards. So more details about these configurations you can refer to 10.6 UI content on EST. So first comes the EST profile configuration. In the global configuration context, we have to mention crypto, PK, EST profile under EST profile name. So once we configure it, it will jump to the EST profile context where we can mention the URL to reach the EST server and VRF in which the EST server will be reachable, and then the secure username and password for EST server connection, and then the retry interval, retry count, arbitrary label enrollment, arbitrary label re-enrollment, and re-enrollment lead time. So next comes the certificate enrollment configuration. So these configurations also are available from initial releases of our AOS-CX switches. So only difference in this enhancement is this configuration was not residing in our switch configuration, but they will be residing now. So in the global configuration context, we need to mention crypto PK certificate and a friendly name for a certificate. And once we configure it, it will jump to the certificate context. In the certificate context, we can mention the key type and the key size and certificate parameters like subject, common name, country, locality, organization unit, and state. So once we configure all the certificate parameters, we need to make sure we mention the method in which the certificate can be enrolled. So here we are planning to use EST. So we have to mention that enrollment is via the EST profile and then the name of the EST profile that was configured before. So let's see the sample configuration. First comes the CLI format. So here we have configured a certificate crypto, PK, certificate, and then the certificate friendly name. And we have mentioned the subject with common name. And then when we are mentioning the enrollment, we need to make sure we provide the correct EST profile name. So enroll via EST profile and the EST profile name. This is the EST profile that was created already that contains a URL and then username password. And this is a certificate of the EST server TA profile. Next comes the JSON format. So similar to a CLI format, even in JSON format, we mention the certificate name and then the EST profile and then the common name for the certificate. Now let's see the show commands. First, we have configured the EST profile and now we wanted to see the list of EST profile configured. For that, we can use this show command, show crypto, PK, EST profile and then the profile name. So once the EST profile is configured and it is working fine, it will download the CS certificates from the EST server. So to know the list of TA certificates downloaded, we can use this show command, show crypto, PK, TA profile, and then the name of the TA profile name. So once the TA profiles are downloaded, we can enroll for a certificate. And once the certificate enrollment is completed, we wanted to know whether the enrollment is success or not. So for that, we can use this show command, show crypto, PK, certificate, and name of the certificate. If optionally, if we are using the client certificate for communication between the EST server and our switch, we can make sure to know which is the certificate that has been associated with that application. So we can use this command, show crypto, make a application. Let's see the best practices for this feature. First comes the DNS resolution. If we have configured FQDN as a URL for this EST server, make sure the DNS are resolved and correct port is configured in the URL. Since this is a publicly infrastructure, make sure the time is synchronized between our AOS-CX switch and then the EST server. If we have a different server as a CS server than the EST server, make sure the EST server contains the change certificate of the CS server. Like it should have the root certificate and then the intermediate certificates. Only then, when the switch is approaching the EST server, both the root and the intermediate certificate will be downloaded into the switch. So once the certificate enrollment is successful, later on, if you wanted to delete the certificate enrolled, we make sure the configuration is removed and we don't save the configuration. What happens is when we reboot the switch, the certificate will be enrolled again. So once the configuration for the certificate is deleted, make sure we save the configuration so it will not be again re-enrolled. Let's say the troubleshooting. If there is any issue with the features, how can we troubleshoot it? First comes the debugging. The EST client implementation on AOS-CX switches has very good debug log messages. To enable them, we need to enable the CLI, debug, PK all with severity as debug. So we can have the debug destination buffer or console or as a syslog where the debug messages will be stored. So if we are using other applications for the config push, we can also debug the events related to them. Like for netedit, debug restore, for central, debug central all. So let's see the common issues faced with this feature. First comes the EST server reachability. If there is any issue with the EST server reachability, you can check the DNS service, whether the DNS server is able to resolve the FQDN of the EST server. Even if that is working, next we have to check the TCP port. If the TCP port is blocked from the path from the switch to the EST server using any firewall, we need to make sure the TCP port is unblocked. Next comes the CSR's request fails. We need to validate the URL and make sure the URL is provides the correct URL of the EST server. And next comes the server certificate validity. Make sure the root CS certificate is installed correctly with its purpose set appropriately. And also the EST server certificate should contain the SAN CN based on the EST profile configuration. And EST server also should contain the full chain certificates of the CS server. Both the intermediate and then the root certificate should be present with correct fields. So if all these are working, and next comes the enrollment. If for any reason the enrollment fails, first we need to check is the username password, whether the username password provided in the EST profile is correct or not. Apart from the username password, if we are trying to use any EST specific client certificate in our CX switches, we need to make sure the certificate is correctly applied to the EST profile. And once certificate profile is also correct, still then the certificate enrollment fields, we need to check whether the client and server have the clock synced. So if there is a time mismatch, the certificate enrollment will also fail. Let's see the resources of this feature. So you can refer the following resources for this feature. First comes the RFC 5280. It is RFC that states about the PK infrastructure and certificate revocation. So we do follow this RFC. For more details about the PK infrastructure, you can refer this RFC. RFC 7030. This is the RFC for the EST server and EST client implementation. So you can refer this RFC 7030 for the EST client implementation present in our AOS-CX switches. So for more details about the legacy EST feature present in AOS-CX switches, you can refer this YouTube video that is part of 10.6 release update. So next comes the demo part. So let's see what is the topology that will be used in this demo. So we will have any of our AOS-CX switch, and then we have the center that is used to push the configuration for the switches. And additionally, we have a TFTP server that can also be used to import the configuration in the AOS-CX switch. And we'll be using ClearPass onboard as an EST server. So there are other third-party servers also available for the EST, but we are planning to use ClearPass onboard. So let's jump into the demo. Let's see the demo. Here I have a AOS-CX 300 switch. So it is running in 10.11 version. Let me show the configuration available in it. First is the TA profile for the EST server. So that is the TA profile that will be used for communication between the EST server and then our switch as a EST client. So next comes the EST profile configuration. Here I am using the CPPM as a EST profile. I am configured it with the URL. And for security, I am using a username password. Next, I have created one of the certificate, the common name as EST cert, and enrolled using the EST profile CPPM. So let's see the certificate. So the certificate enrollment was successful and it has been shown as enrollment success here. Now let me take a backup of this configuration to a TFTP server. So this is my TFTP server. I'm using a CLI format for the copy. So it is over management VRF. So the config backup is successful. So let me open the configuration. So if you could see here, the configuration backup is successful and the configuration of that certificate is present in this configuration. Now let me restart the configuration and bring up the switch in factory reset setup. So I am not saving any of the configuration. So I am booting to the same image. Now I'm planning to enroll a new certificate in this configuration. I will remove this certificate and create a new certificate. So I'm mentioning it as EST cert new with common name. So now with only this configuration changes in this config backup file, we can able to enroll a new certificate in our CA switches. Now switches come up after array startup. It does not have any configurations currently. You could see from the show run. So what I will do is now I will enable debug PK all for the debug logging. So now all the PK related debug logs will be present in the console. So now let's import the configuration backup or the new configuration which we wanted to place it in our switches. So I am using the same TFTP server. So this is the TFTP server. And the name of the configuration backup. And the name of the configuration backup EST underscore config. And I'm placing it in the running config. Yeah, or management VRF. So if we could see here, the list of debug messages related to the PK infrastructure are displayed in the console. So let's see what happens. So we have the configuration uploaded. So this is the new certificate request which we have made in the configuration. Let's see whether the enrollment is successful. Yeah, the enrollment is success here. It clearly mentioned the enrollment success. For more details about the certificate, we can use the crypto PK certificate and then the name of the certificate. So the certificate is created with our ClearPass as a EST server, and it is enrolled to our EST, and enrollment status for the EST is success. So not only the certificate, even the TA certificates of this leaf certificate is also installed in our switches. So if you could see here, there are two certificates. One is the intermediate, and then the other is the main root CA certificate. So if you see here, show crypto PK TA profile. So it will list both the TA certificates, TA01 and TA00. So these are enrolled over the EST. So now let's go back with the debug logs. So first the EST profile was created. So once that is applied, we verifies whether the SAN CN of the profile name matches the certificate in the EST server. So that validation happens. So once that validation happens, we try to download the CA certificates. So it says starting CA certificate validate and updated the TA certificate. First is TA00, next is TA01. It will be downloaded and validated. So if you see here, TA01 is validated. So once these are validated, we'll try to enroll the certificate. So next comes the CSR of that certificate, which we created in the config backup file. So that certificate has been requested for the EST server for enrollment. You see here, the password is also passed to the EST server for security validation. So now the EST server has accepted it and the enrollment of the certificate is successful. Now again, the SAN CN validation and then the TA profile download is checked. To make sure that if there is any updates with the CA certificate, it has to be updated again. So once this is present, the certificate enrollment is successful now. So now let's see even in the CPPM whether the enrollment is successful. So when we go to the ClearPass onboard, that is the EST server here, the administration, support, and application log, it will display all the certificate related logs. So let us refresh it again. So now we could clearly see there is a certificate signing request has come to the ClearPass onboard. So with the certificate common name we have created, EST cert new. So if you click the info, it will display. So from which switch the certificate request has come. So it has come from 10.68.85. If you see in the switch, that is the IP address of the switch 10.68.85. So now it is clearly visible, like using this configuration push, we can enroll a new certificate in our CX switches and use it for our applications. Previously, we have seen using TFTP server how this config distribution was happening. Now, the major use case of this new enhancement is via central. Let's see the feature with the central. So I'm using here a template group where the device is present. So I'm visiting to the group. So I have visited the template group. Here I'm going to the device specific page. So I have 164.05 switch already present in the template group. Now I'm going to the configuration page of the device. So we can either do it in a device specific or even in the templates. So I'm trying to edit the template here. So if you see, this is the golden template used for the devices. It is also having the EST server TA profile configuration, EST profile configuration. Even here I'm using the CPPM and then the certificate configuration. Now, apart from this certificate, let me enroll a new certificate. I'm just copying this configuration and creating a new certificate. So I'm naming it as a new certificate as central certificate new. And I'm using the same EST profile CPPM. So before we save this configuration, let's view the switch. So I'm trying to open the switch again. So let me show the certificates available already. So I have only one certificate that was enrolled previously. Now I'm trying to add the new certificate from the central. So let me save this configuration. And we'll go to the audit trial to check the events. So it's applying the template to the device. So we'll wait for the config push to be successful. So parallelly, we'll run this command in our switch as well. So if you could see here, the new configuration is pushed and the new certificate enrollment is successful now. We can check the more details about the certificate using this detail command. The new certificate is created with the common name as central cert, whichever we have created from the central template page. So hence, even we can use central to push this configuration and becomes handy for customers who are using central-based deployments. They no need to go to the switch CLI context and then manually enroll the certificates. They can just push the new certificate configuration from the central, and that will enroll a new certificate using EST. Thanks everyone for watching this recording. If you have any further queries, do post your queries in our Harrods community.